My name is Caroline Brooks. I was born and raised in Charlottesville, Virginia. I'm 34. I've spent half my life inside a system designed to keep secrets. Some from enemies, some from allies, and some from families. Ours was a house of rank and ribbons. My father, a Navy commander before he retired, kept his medals in a locked walnut case above the fireplace. My mother liked to iron dress blues even when no one asked her to. And then there was Alex, my older brother, the one everyone saw. Alex was the kind of boy who could do a chin-up at 6, give a graduation speech at 16, and land a pilot slot before 20. At every Thanksgiving, someone would say, "So, Alex, tell us about the aircraft carrier again." No one ever asked me what I was working on. I didn't mind. At least, I told myself I didn't. I had books, computers, puzzles, and questions too specific for dinner conversation. At 13, I built a weather monitoring drone out of parts I salvaged from my neighbor's old lawnmower. At 15, I cracked into a city traffic grid just to see if I could. I didn't even change anything. I just looked around and left without a trace. No one noticed. At 17, I got a letter. It wasn't from MIT, like my guidance counselor expected. It was from Annapolis, the U.S. Naval Academy. Not the kind of place people imagine for girls like me, but it was what I chose. It surprised everyone, including Alex. He shook my hand awkwardly at the train station the day I left. "You'll probably hate it," he said, half smirking. "They're not gentle with brains." "I don't need them to be," I replied. I didn't write home much. Boot camp broke me open and rebuilt me differently. I learned to speak less, listen more, and run until my lungs forgot what air was. Everyone else was climbing toward command tracks: surface warfare, aviation, strategy. I went dark. I asked for cyber operations and intelligence. It didn't sound glamorous. That was fine. Glamour has a smell. It's expensive cologne, a fresh haircut before promotion, a smile when the cameras are watching. I preferred shadows. I liked data, code, prediction models, anomaly tracking. I liked knowing things no one else did. By the time I was 29, I had already served in 3 continents, held 2 different clearances, and led a classified joint operation no one in my family had ever heard of. They thought I had left the service. My mother once told a neighbor I worked in consulting. I never corrected her. At 32, I was promoted again. The memo went out across command channels, but nothing ever made it home. That's how it worked. My name was never meant for news articles or parade rosters. But everything changed on a crisp October morning in D.C. It was the day Alex was receiving his Distinguished Service Medal at the Kennedy Center. There were banners with his name, a televised segment, even a podcast. He had earned it, I suppose. He had led a carrier group through a tense standoff in the South Pacific and handled the press like a movie star. I wasn't on the guest list. Not that I expected to be. Still, I went, quietly. No uniform, no announcement, just a gray coat and a seat in the back. If they'd let me in, they didn't. "Sorry, ma'am," said the young man at the gate. "The event is closed to the public. Guests only." "I'm family," I said calmly. "Not on the list." I paused, stepped back. My breath came in slow, steady pulls. I didn't argue. That wasn't my way. But someone else did. From behind the rope, a voice cut clean through the morning noise. "Let her in." The guard froze. "Sir." "She's with me." The voice belonged to Admiral Jonathan Mason, tall, silver-haired, sharp-eyed, one of the most powerful figures in the entire U.S. Navy. He didn't look at me like most do. He didn't look past me either. He nodded once, as if we were old colleagues. In a way, we were. The guard saluted before stepping aside. I walked in, feeling dozens of eyes trying to figure out who I was. And for the first time in a very long time, I let them wonder. The lobby smelled like polished brass and freshly brewed coffee. Men and women in full dress uniform mingled with suits and civilian dignitaries, each bearing medals or nameplates that caught the light like teeth. My heels echoed across the marble as I entered, low, steady, deliberate. Eyes followed. No one said anything. They rarely did when they couldn't place you. I didn't look like someone who belonged there. Not yet. Alex's face was everywhere. On posters, brochures, even a looping slideshow projected on the wall. There was one photo of him saluting aboard the USS Monarch, his posture sharp, smile framed by sunlight. Another of him standing with the Secretary of Defense, shaking hands over a blurred crowd of sailors. They'd chosen well. He looked like the kind of man America liked to be proud of. There was no mention of his sister. Not in the speech programs, not in the bios, not in the anecdotes the ushers traded with guests over tiny plastic cups of orange juice. Still, I watched. I stayed by a column in the far left wing of the hall, close enough to see the stage, far enough to disappear again if I needed to. The ceremony began exactly on schedule. Of course it did. It was a Navy event. Every light dimmed. A marching band played a precise, dignified rendition of the anthem. Then came the introductions. Rear Admiral Thomas Keller stepped forward to speak first. He was all thunder and jawlines, his voice reverberating like a steel drum. He called Alex a man of steel, of principle, and of great American spirit. He called him a born leader. He called him the future of the fleet. People clapped. Some stood. I didn't. I watched Alex enter from stage left, grinning just enough to show humility without hiding pride. His medals caught the light like mirrors. He saluted, accepted his plaque, nodded like a good son of the flag. And then, just as the applause swelled again, the Admiral leaned into the microphone. "There's someone else here today," he said, "who's made a contribution we can't quantify in citations or ceremonies. Someone whose service you may not know, but who shaped more of our defense operations than you realize." The room hushed. Eyes scanned. I didn't move. "She doesn't usually attend events like this," the Admiral continued, tone shifting from showman to soldier. "She doesn't need the attention. She's not in your headlines, but she's in every encrypted bite you sleep under at night." My stomach tightened. I knew what he was doing. I didn't know why. "And today," he finished, "I'm honored to acknowledge Rear Admiral Caroline Brooks, SAR U.S. Naval Cyber Command, one of the most critical minds in our defense infrastructure." The silence cracked. Heads turned, first in confusion, then disbelief. I felt the air move as half the room inhaled at once. Someone clapped, hesitantly. Another followed, and suddenly it was a wave. Cautious, incomplete, but real. A ripple of realization rolled across the crowd. Alex's head turned in my direction. He froze. For a second, his expression held. It didn't break into joy or pride. It didn't even register as anger. It was something else. Something between betrayal and awe, like he'd seen a ghost wearing his last name. I didn't smile. I just gave a slight nod. The same nod I gave to every superior, every operator, every satellite tech who'd ever asked me, "Do you have the situation handled?" Always the same answer: "I do." After the ceremony, I slipped away before the crowd unraveled. The last thing I wanted was a line of curious civilians asking what I did. The irony was, even if I told them, they wouldn't understand. My job wasn't about screens and keystrokes. It was about shadows. About anticipating things before they happened. About keeping quiet long enough to listen for what no one else could hear. But Alex found me anyway. He stepped into the side hallway outside the main hall, still in full uniform, jacket perfect, a ward clutched in one hand. He didn't speak at first, just stood there, looking. Then finally, in a low voice, he asked, "Why didn't you ever tell me?" I met his eyes. "You never asked." His brow tightened. "I thought you were out. Mom said you were working in tech somewhere in Boston." I was, just not the kind of tech she imagined. He stared, searching. "You outrank me. That's not the point, isn't it?" He didn't say it with bitterness. Not exactly. More like someone suddenly realizing the foundation of his world had a basement he never knew existed. I glanced at his medal. "You earned that. You led men in open water, in real danger. You deserved this day." He shook his head slowly. "But you were there too, weren't you? Behind the screens, feeding us data, guiding the operations." I didn't answer. We stood there, the two of us. Same name, same blood, two very different branches of the same legacy. And for the first time in years, I saw something shift in his eyes. Recognition. Not pity, not confusion. Respect. It was a beginning, but only a beginning. I didn't go home right away. After the ceremony, I walked alone through the cool avenues of Washington, the streets humming with quiet energy. Flags fluttered from stone buildings. Tourists took pictures in front of monuments they didn't understand, and beneath it all pulsed the city's invisible machinery. Data streams, encrypted comms, shadows layered over shadows. That was the world I knew. And even here, surrounded by monuments to history, I felt more comfortable among ghosts than with family. But my phone buzzed before sunset. "Dinner. Tonight," Dad insists. It was from Alex. No punctuation, no emotion, just the echo of obligation. The Brooks household hadn't changed much. The furniture was still heavy, leather and oak. The walls were still covered in certificates and plaques, most of them bearing Alex's name. My father's old officer's sword still hung in the den like some kind of ancestral relic. Nothing of mine was anywhere, not even my Annapolis diploma. I arrived last. Mom opened the door with a too-wide smile. Her hair was perfect, her pearls familiar. She stepped aside and gestured for me to come in like I was a guest. "You look so sharp," she said after a pause, as if trying to choose the right adjective from a menu of inappropriate ones. "Hi, Mom." In the dining room, my father was already seated at the head of the table, back straight, hands folded. His uniform days were long behind him, but he still wore discipline like a second skin. "Caroline," he said. No warmth, just the name. Like a command. "Sir," I replied instinctively before I caught myself. Alex sat on the right side, his medal already off, sleeves rolled up, trying to look casual, but his eyes were tracking everything, always had been. He could read a battlefield faster than most officers. I wondered if he could read what was happening here. Dinner was quiet at first, silverware. Glasses clinking, a few awkward stabs at conversation. "So," Mom said finally, "you work with computers?" I blinked. "I command a cybersecurity and intelligence unit." "That's what I told Mrs. Hartford," she said, nodding quickly. "Something with security. You're very smart with all that code." "Isn't she smart, Robert?" My father didn't answer immediately. He reached for his wine glass. Then he set it down, untouched. "Why didn't we know?" he asked, eyes never leaving mine. "Why keep it hidden?" "You never asked," I said again, softer this time. He frowned. "I always ask about your work. You say you can't talk about it." "Because I couldn't. That's how it works." "You could have said something. You let us believe you walked away." "I didn't let you believe anything. You assumed I didn't belong because I wasn't standing in the spotlight." Silence. Across the table, Alex shifted. "She didn't just belong," he said. "She was pulling strings we didn't even see." "Dad," She outranks half the Joint Command. That got his attention. His gaze narrowed, calculating. You're still in active service? I nodded. Rank? Rear Admiral. He leaned back, slowly. That was when I saw it. Not pride, not disappointment. Something colder. The kind of stillness that settles over a man when the rules he thought governed the world no longer apply. This family, he said, has always believed in service with honor, in visibility, in showing the flag. I've served, with honor, just not for show. That's not what I meant. It's exactly what you meant. My voice was quiet but steady. You're proud of Alex because he stands in front of people and says the right things. You're proud because his name gets printed. But you don't know what pride looks like in the dark. You don't know what it costs to stay silent when you want to be seen. I didn't choose the shadows because I was hiding. I chose them because someone had to. My mother looked like she wanted to cry, or apologize, or both. But she stayed frozen. Alex set his fork down and leaned forward. She led the cyber operation that shut down the Kavorka breach. You remember that thing last year? The Russian submarine ghost signal off the Atlantic coast? That wasn't a glitch. It was an attack. And she stopped it. My father's jaw flexed. He looked at me like I was someone he'd never been properly introduced to. You were involved in that? He asked. I let it. He didn't speak again for the rest of dinner. Later, after the dishes were cleared and the silence had thickened into something unbearable, I stood to leave. Mom touched my arm, gently. I didn't know, she said. We didn't know. I know. I would have been proud of you. If I had known. I looked her in the eye. You could have been proud anyway. Outside, the air was cooler now. The stars above Virginia looked deceptively quiet. But I knew better. There were satellites watching, algorithms running, silent wars being waged in frequencies and firewalls. Alex followed me out to the driveway. He didn't speak right away, just leaned against his car, arms crossed. I was wrong about you, he said finally. I shrugged. You weren't wrong. You just weren't curious. He gave a short, almost rueful laugh. What would it take to work under you? A transfer? A formal request? I turned to him. Are you serious? I've spent my whole life thinking leadership was about being visible. Maybe it's time I learned something else. I didn't answer right away. Just looked at him. The same brother who once said I'd hate the academy, who used to be the favorite, who was now looking at me not as a sibling, but as a commander. Send in the request, I said quietly. I'll review it. He nodded. Nothing dramatic. Just a simple nod between two officers. It was a start, but it wasn't the end. The Pentagon at night is a different creature. During the day, it buzzes like a hive. Crisp uniforms, clacking heels, paper cups of coffee, analysts walking fast with folders held tight. But after Aero 100 hours, it changes. The air gets heavier. The lights dim. Security checkpoints whisper open and closed like secrets. I walked its halls alone, the silence brushing against my boots. My new office was in the E-ring, the place where decisions shaped borders, alliances, and sometimes even time itself. Most people didn't know the Navy had a cyber warfare branch this deep in the chain. Fewer still knew who ran it. The desk was clean, untouched, no family pictures, no flags, just a polished surface and two locked drawers. I didn't need symbols. The work spoke louder. 2 weeks earlier, the president had signed my promotion. My name, Rear Admiral Caroline M. Brooks, was listed in the official Federal Register, black text on white paper. No press release, no headline. Just confirmation that I now had direct influence over the Navy's Strategic Cyber Command. I wasn't supposed to matter to the public. But things had changed. It started small. A classified briefing here. A consultation on drone autonomy protocols there. Then came the invitation to sit on the Interbranch Strategic Task Force, something that hadn't included a cyber intelligence officer before. By month's end, my name was on 3 joint directives. Analysts began calling my approach Brooks Logic. A memo leaked, not intentionally, and for the first time in my career, a reporter sent a request to verify if I even existed. I didn't respond. Power, I had learned, is quietest when it is most real. Alex adjusted well. Better than I expected. He submitted the formal transfer, passed all the clearances, and joined my operations group 2 weeks later. At first, he was quiet, observant. But he didn't flinch. Didn't complain. He listened. He asked smart questions. He was learning. In our 3rd week together, I called him into a secure meeting room. I'd reviewed a complex scenario simulation, one where a friendly drone formation had been manipulated mid-flight by a 0-day exploit. His name was on the suggested counter-strategy. "You wrote this?" I asked. "Yeah," he said. Didn't know if it was good. "It's not good," I said, tapping the file. "It's exceptional." His eyes lit up, the way they used to at 10 years old when Dad let him steer the boat on Lake Anna. "You're not here to be my brother," I added. "You're here to be an officer. You want to stay. You earn it like everyone else." He stood straighter. "Understood, ma'am." That night, I walked past the glass wall of the briefing room and saw him alone, going over data models, tracing patterns with a red grease pencil like I used to. He hadn't noticed me watching. He was too focused. In that moment, I realized something had changed. Not in him. In me. I had stopped measuring myself against him. I didn't need the family's approval anymore. I didn't need a medal or applause or even a nameplate on a polished desk. The things I'd done, the breaches I'd stopped, the missions I'd guided, the officers I'd trained, they didn't disappear just because no one clapped. They lived. In systems. In doctrines. In lives unbroken. Still, they found their way back to me. It was a month after my new appointment when I got a package. No return address. Just a flat, dark blue box with a Navy seal embossed on the top. Inside, carefully placed, was a single photograph. It showed a table, the one at the family house, the old dining room, and at its center, my Annapolis diploma. Framed. Finally. No note. No name, but I knew who had sent it. 2 weeks later, I returned home. Not as a stranger. Not as a ghost. My father met me at the door. He didn't salute. He didn't smile. He said, "Took me too long." I nodded. "But you got there." He stepped aside to let me in. I walked past the walnut case over the fireplace. My picture was there now, next to Alex's. It was small, but it was there. And for the first time, I realized I hadn't been waiting for permission to exist. I had just needed them to look. Really look. They finally did. Now, when the Navy speaks of leadership, they sometimes use my name. Not loudly, not in parades, but in closed-door sessions, war rooms, simulations. My strategies are doctrine, my silence is a legacy. And Alex? He says the same thing to every new officer under my command. Watch her carefully. She doesn't need the room to notice her, but the room always follows. And they do, because I'm not the shadow anymore. I am the shape the light takes when it finally knows where to fall. You know, life doesn't always put the spotlight where it belongs. Sometimes you can give everything, your time, your heart, your loyalty, and still go unnoticed. Sometimes the people closest to you see only the version of you they expect, not the one you've become. But that doesn't mean you stop. You keep going. You work. You grow. You serve something bigger than yourself, even when no one's watching. Because being overlooked doesn't mean you don't matter, and staying quiet doesn't mean you're weak. In the end, what defines us isn't the recognition we get. It's the character we build in the silence and how we choose to carry ourselves when no one is clapping. I hope this story reminded you of that. And if it did, please give this video a like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and leave a comment below. Tell us about a time you had to keep going, even when no one saw the work you were doing. This channel is about real people, quiet heroes, the ones who've been betrayed, tested, overlooked. But who came out stronger? There are more stories coming. Stories that might even remind you of your own. So stay with us. You're not alone.